This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And it is almost the end of the year, but we're ready to call it. Let's call 2024 at this point. Can we just call it? It's done.
Mercy rules.
Mercy rule, yeah. Everybody go home. We're done. We're doing our year in review in between the holidays, which would be Christmas and New Year's for those who celebrate. For those who don't, I hope you're enjoying whatever you are celebrating or not celebrating. Hopefully with some fine foods and chocolates.
I hope you celebrate or don't celebrate all day.
Yes. This is the time of the year where we look back at all we have done. We look upon ye works and tremble at all of the awesome music we got to check out this year. This was a very diverse year, not only because we launched the 80s metal podcast, but we just had a lot of really interesting albums to review on the podcast this year. And we always like to go back, look through the year, because sometimes you go, wait, that was this year? We did that this year?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It was in February.
There was a couple of albums that we did this year. I was like, I thought we did that like 3 years ago. Supergrass and Superchunk were the two. I was like, really? We did those this year? Okay.
To be fair, in Superchunk's defense, we did do a Superchunk album previously, so you could be, but Supergrass, I'm sorry, you're, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Where you're like, wait a minute, didn't we do that during COVID?
I thought we did all the super bands years ago.
Oh, we still got more to go.
Yeah,
unfortunately, there's more super bands that we haven't even gotten to, but a lot of great albums suggested by our patrons through patreon.com, where all of our union members reside, and they picked a lot of great records, and we had a lot of great records submitted through the website digmeoutpodcast.com that were voted on by our patrons. So let's take a little look back, Jay. Let's talk about or just give me a few of the records that you were like, wow, this is a great record. I had never heard this before, and I'm genuinely surprised at how awesome this is. I wasn't expecting this. Is there anything that pops to mind?
I have a couple. Yeah. The Lemonheads is a shame about Ray. I mean, I kind of heard some of those songs and I was familiar with the band, but I never really spent a ton of time with any individual album. And that one was very strong. Songwriting wise, production is really unique and interesting. I love the vocals. Jesus Jones was another one. Same situation. Like I had heard Jesus Jones. And we did Perverse, and I was blown away by how innovative that record sounds, but also is kind of timeless. And which is, you usually don't use those two words together to describe an album, but it also is, I think, pulls off this somehow live energy, even though it's all completely recorded digitally. Some great songs. No Knife is another one. Really familiar with their later stuff.
Yep.
Never spent time with the earlier stuff. Was shocked at how good the record was, both from a songwriting standpoint and a production standpoint. So those were a couple that popped to mind. How about you?
Well, I agree with you on the No Knife. I don't know why it took so long to go back, because I really like the third and fourth records. So shame on me and both of us for not having checked out that record because it was really great. We had done Poster Children in the 80s episode, or sorry, in the 2000s episodes for our bonus content on Patreon, but we got to do RTFM for the regular podcast this year. And again, I'm like, how do I not love this band? Like for years, like every time I listen to an album, I'm blown away by how cool it is. And that was a reminder of how cool that band is. Dwarves album was a lot of fun. No idea what the Dwarves were about. I just knew they were a punk band. Didn't realize how catchy and melodic their songs were at being like a minute and a half and 2 minutes long. Like just crazy catchy songs. Like you, I really enjoyed the Jesus Jones album. That was really interesting to hear. And then one that was brought to us that well, I have to temper this. I was surprised at how well Cracked Rear View did in review comparison to like how horrible we thought all these years, like, oh, this is a terrible record. But when you listen to it and you go, oh, dang it, there's some really good songwriting on this. And maybe all these lyrics aren't terrible. Yes, Only Want to Be With You still drives me insane. But I'm not saying I love that record, but I definitely was caught off guard by, especially some of the album tracks, where I was like, this is a little bit better than I remember. And probably if this had not sold a gazillion copies, like we talked about, it probably wouldn't be derided the way it is now. Yeah. But that was a nice rediscovery, and just it got to temper my dislike for it and just kind of just go, okay, I respect what's going on here.
Yeah, it was fun to just take it for the music, like forget all the other stuff, that baggage that comes with that band and their popularity and what, you know, whatever perceptions you have, and just listen to it. I think it was a chance for both of us just to put all that aside and just listen to the music. And I think we were both surprised we, you know, didn't hate it and kind of enjoyed some of it.
Yeah. Now, were there any records?
It.
Were there any records that were just like total left field? You had no idea what this band was, what the band was about going in, or what this review album was going to. So I'll give you an example. Like we did the compilation. It came from Slimy Valley, which is a bunch of hardcore bands. I had no idea what was going to happen with that record.
Yeah.
This is a compilation. And I ended up liking quite a bit of it, to the point where like I picked a couple songs and put them on my playlist that I've listened to every day. So there's a couple of 1980s hardcore songs from Simi Valley that are in my playlist now. That and the Blind Guardian album, I had no idea that Blind Guardian existed. That was a shocker. And again, like it's one of those albums where you hear it and you go, this is either super dumb or super awesome. I'm leaning towards super awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Blind Guardian. I you know, I want to say it's rare. I'm a metal fan, and you don't have to be super, you know, inventive to be good in the genre. You just have to, you know, deliver. And that's a band that it does something different. And it's not like I mean, I guess it's kind of extreme, but usually when a band's doing something different in metal, it's usually like an extreme abrasive thing. And what they're doing different is this vocal production that is part Freddie Mercury, part Blackie Lawless is the way that I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And the layering and the sort of Queen qualities that are all over that album, despite being like a very aggressive, powerful metal record.
Yeah.
A couple others were Ho Hum, which,
Mm-hmm.
Between the band name and the album cover and the album title, Local, I mean, this could be anything. It had like some weird paintings of ghosts on the cover. You don't know what you're getting. And it ends up being this really dynamic, catchy kind of pop album. You can hear some Tom Petty, some Buffalo Tom, some Elvis Costello on that album. Good energy.
Don't go out with your friends tonight. Don't think they like me much. Maybe think I'm a little bit strange and just out of touch. Every time you walking out, yeah, I'm wondering what you're thinking about, and I can never get close to you. I can never get close to you. I can never get close to you. When you're out with your friends tonight, I feel so all alone. I was thinking that maybe it's time I struck out on my own.
Straightforward kind of delivery, but really high quality, and would not have expected it from anything going into it.
Yeah.
Love Nut was kind of the same way. Like, what a terrible name. What does that mean? This could be a terrible local band, and end up being like a really good power pop album.
Yep. Another one that that was a total no idea what this is going to sound like was the Hookers album, Black Visions of Crimson Wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not for everybody, including the people that are in the house with me. Don't like that record. But man, there are a couple just rippers on that record that I listen to every once in a while on the playlist. That was unexpected. Which I believe that was an Eric Peterson pick, and he always brings us interesting stuff. So I shouldn't have been surprised that he brought an interesting action rock adjacent album. Roundtables. We did a couple more than we had done in the last few years, and we got to do, I think, like 4 or 5 roundtables this year. We finally tackled the nu metal genre this year, and that ended up being really one of my favorite episodes of the whole year, not just of the roundtables, but just because we kind of got a deeper understanding of that. It was great to have Keith Miller on and share his perspective. I still have my preferences when it comes to those bands. They tend not to be in the Limp Bizkit, Korn end of things. They tend to be like the Deftones end of things, where a little bit more expansive sound, but it definitely left me with a better understanding of that genre. So did you have a particular favorite roundtable of the year?
Well, I agree with you on the nu metal one for all the same reasons. I think I have a better understanding of the importance of that genre of music at that time and what it meant to people, which was cool. The albums of 1994, that series we've done now every year in the 90s. So it was a particularly good year and also a fun series to do. I don't know that we're not going to do them again. So if you want to hear those, the last one would have been 94, and we've done every year since then. And I guess the other one would be Bruce Springsteen in the 90s.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of pockets of his work. Some stuff in the 70s, some of the like newer stuff. Didn't know. I kind of remembered him in the 90s. I wasn't really following him or buying any of his music. So that was a fun
Yeah.
trip back just to see how he weathered things and to dig into a couple of those albums. And you know, like most artists, he was affected by the decade, so those are always fun to dig into, and something we're going to do more of in the new series Surviving the 90s.
Yeah, and that was the episode just before this, and a lot of fun to hang out with Chip and go into a deep dive on the career, the greatest hits, and the 90s of Styx, one of those bands that are sort of ubiquitous when it comes to classic rock radio, but that, like you and Chip, like you absolutely know like 10 deep singles, blah blah blah, and have no idea what they did in the 90s, just completely off the radar. And there's a bunch of bands like that we're going to do going forward. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that episode. I also really enjoyed doing our 80s metal podcasts this year, which we launched in January with Chip. So much fun. So many albums. Did you have any particular records, Jay, that stood out for you that we reviewed that maybe you weren't familiar with, or ones that you hadn't listened to in a long time? You got to hear it with fresh ears.
There's a lot of them that I was familiar with. I'll stick to the ones that were new. Tigertailz, Berserk, was a lot of fun. I think all walked away being impressed by that record. That's a band that, like, in my memory, kind of had I kind of remember what they looked like, and they were to the extreme of the glam thing.
Yeah.
So to spend some time digging into this album and seeing how good it was and how good the songwriting was a lot of fun. Another one that was fun was Riot, The Privilege of Power. Just such a weird album, but it was fun just to also do the history on that band and spend a little time trying to understand and unwrap who the heck they are and how they got to where they got to make this this weird album. In the, I guess it would have been like a 90, I think it was a 90 release. Horns on it, and just like a bizarre metal album that was a lot of fun. And then there were there's a lot in here that I was familiar with that I had. It was a fun excuse to go back and listen to, like Blue Murder. I hadn't listened to in years. Huge Badlands fan, so it was fun to nerd on Badlands with everybody. How about you?
Well, the Tigertailz album probably is the standout. Love Bomb Baby has been. I just play that for everybody that I can. I'm like, this is the greatest song you've never heard. And they usually look at me like, really? I'm like, dude, this song is amazing. It is amazing. So that was one. On the flip side, I didn't really know Danzig that well. I knew Mother. I knew he was in the Misfits, but I was never a big Misfits fan or a Misfits fan at all. So getting to hear that record, yes, there are issues with it, but I really enjoyed quite a bit of that album. And the sparseness, just like the raw energy of that record. And that was a lot of fun. And then my own pick, which was based off of one song, Paradox, the album Heresy, which is, that's a big, loud, fast, deep, long record of just some crazy riffing, and if you are into like Master of Puppets era Metallica and that sort of thrash, I think you would, if you haven't heard that record, you should. Again, like I know it's my own pick, but I did not even listen to it basically before I picked it. I just went, oh, that's one song I like. Let's do this. So those were definitely some of my picks. But honestly, like the whole year was a lot of fun. I think we said it, but up until the Joe Satriani album, I don't think I gave anything a decent single. Everything was either a worthy album or a better EP, which is pretty good.
And we did our first interview. We did
Yep.
an episode with Bob Halligan Jr., who's a co-writer on Kix's Midnight Dynamite. So that was a lot of fun. It's fun to talk to people like that, where, you know, super smart guy, you know, has written for a lot of people, is in a very interesting position to come in with that band and, you know, write not only hard rock songs in their vein, but also help them, you know, stretch a little bit with writing ballads, and ends up on the next record, you know, co-writing their biggest hit.
Yep.
So that was a lot of fun.
We covered a lot this year with the help of Chip. We did the 80s metal show. We also did some 2000s podcasts for our patrons. If you're not a Patreon member, you're probably not aware of this, but we did we recorded 5 for this year. We recorded one of them was for last year, and unfortunately we will be behind again this year, and we will be putting out one. But you know, we did Violent Soho. That was actually, I think, the first one that was the one left over from last year, I think. Or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Violent Soho, McCluskey. What other ones did we have this year? Metric.
Pedro the Lion.
Pedro the Lion. The Drones, which we'll be publishing shortly. And then the final one for 2024, which won the poll, will be And You Know Us by Our Trail of Dead, which we'll be recording at the beginning of January. All those were fun and like different. There wasn't a lot of crossover between those records. You know, there's a lot of crossover between McCluskey and Pedro the Lion. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Other than they play instruments and sing. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That Metric album is a standout for me.
Yep. Absolutely. And going into next year, we usually talk a little bit about what our next year is going to look like. It's going to look relatively the same. It's our 15th year, Jay. 15. Holy Jesus.
We can almost drive.
We can. Well, I feel like podcasts should be in dog years. Like this should be. We're way down the road. We're getting ready to. How many? I'd be curious to know how many podcasts have made it 15 years with a podcast every week.
Mm.
Can the Chat GPT tell us that? Can it inform us?
It could probably take a stab at it.
Probably. So we're going to continue, obviously, our mission to dig out 90s albums and can do some roundtables throughout the year. We're gonna, I think, keep going with our new Surviving the 90s episodes. We'll probably do maybe quarterly. Try to do those.
We'll do a couple more at least to that. Test them out. See how it goes.
Or not quarterly, sorry, but a couple more. We'll be doing the 80s metal podcasts. Hope to do more interviews. Like you said, the Bob Halligan Jr. interview was fantastic. And that was thanks to the Patrick Testa, who happened to reach out for that episode. So we're already, looking at what albums we might do next year compared to who has new releases coming out. I know Richie Kotzen has a new album coming out in like January. What bands was he in? Like he was like one of the guitar players who like was in and out of things, right? He wasn't like a full-time.
He has his own solo career, but then he did a record with Poison. He was in Mr. Big, I think, for an album.
Okay.
And then he did like Winery Dogs and other more recent bands, but probably more known for his solo stuff. He was sort of at first like a shredder, and then he became like more of a blues inspired player and a singer.
Got it. So he's got a new record out next year, I believe. Let's see what else is coming out. There's a bunch of stuff. The Wild Hearts have a new album coming out next year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's called Satanic Rites of the Wild Hearts. Dream Theater has a new album coming out next year. So there'll be some opportunities to maybe Tokyo Blade has a new album coming out in January. That's a more obscure band, but opportunity to talk about records that might be relevant to our 80s metal podcast. And then what else do we got, Jay? Why don't you? I'm doing a lot of talking here. What else have we got on tap for 2025 that we're kicking around?
We're going to try to work in some 2000s album reviews into this feed. So you'll get some, the plan is now to do a handful of those that you get free through here. And then there'll still be some through the paid Patreon. We're going to do the Surviving 90s, like you mentioned. We're going to try to work in some more interviews, so more straightforward deep dives on records like we used to do a couple seasons ago. Have a guest on that's either a writer, artist, producer, or something like that, and we'll go deep on a particular album. What else? And then on the 80s side, we're going to introduce, so if you go to our 80s metal feed and wherever you get podcasts, we're going to start introducing some 70s rock episodes in there. So we'll do 4 or 5 of those throughout the year to give kind of a flavor of both kind of lost and forgotten bands, but also maybe some bands that were, you know, important to the 80s metal sound.
Right.
And those will also be some bonus episodes. So if you become a paid subscriber on Substack or Patreon, you'll get those.
Yeah, that's a important thing to follow up on, because our last 80s metal episode, there was some debate because it's a 1980 album by Rush. So there was discussion, is this metal, is this rock, et cetera, et cetera. But the more important thing is that album was really a 70s album, as we discussed. That was, written and recorded in 79, but released in 80. So I think in the same way that we've dipped into the 80s for our 90s podcast to sort of contextualize what we're actually talking about. I just watched a video on YouTube and I posted it in our Discord, and it was a bunch of bands like Deep Purple and Lord Baltimore that are basically playing early thrash. Like they're playing that speed and that fast, where you could hear where like people who were like guys in Metallica or whatever would hear like this Deep Purple song and go, well, I want to play that fast. But you don't think of Deep Purple as being a thrash band. You think of Deep Purple as just being a classic rock 70s band. But you take like one song and you go, oh, this is really kind of proto metal that's happening here. And there is a ton of songs and bands that are in this video. But the point being that a lot of what it was happening, and new wave of British heavy metal was happening in the 70s. It was not just an early 80s thing. So there's a lot of opportunity to talk about 70s artists in relevance to 80s music, which we've dipped our toes out of the lanes of the decades before, so that's not that big of a deal. And we've also done 2000s episodes in our 90s feed, like the Marvelous 3 record we did, and I think we did a Powderfinger record that was a 2000s album, and those sorts of things. So it's not, we're always bending the rules to suit whatever our decisions are. It's all right. We have a board that we answer to, and they have okayed this. They voted with the shareholders, and they said, do what you want. So I'm looking forward to, I know there's a lot of new music coming out next year that will be relevant to the podcast. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to some of the artists. I know I already mentioned some of that stuff, but there's new albums by like Frontline Assembly and the Dubs and Yola Tango, and The Farm are back after a billion years, and Nine Inch Nails are going to have new music out next year. So, and the Helicopters, there's a lot of opportunity for us to maybe do some interviews with folks that are have new music coming out. Also, the Godzillionaire album with Mark Hennessy from Paw, which is pretty cool. So I think that puts a wrap on this year, although we will be having one more episode after this, but we're gonna like mentally consider it the first episode of 2025 because we really just need to bury 2024 as soon as possible and put this one to bed. We'll be doing our December poll winner. We're not going to wait until January to do it. We're just going to do it at the end of December, and yeah, we're going to jump the gun on that, which is fine. We're on break, we're just sitting at home, drinking eggnog and watching holiday movies. So that's it, Jay. We're done for 2024. Ready to put a bow on this?
Let's wrap it up.
All right. So, for everyone out there, thank you for being a member of the Patreon community or submitting albums through our website. We love everybody that contributes. And if you'd like to become a member of the union, you can do so at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. You can vote in these polls that we've mentioned and also get access to our Discord. The 80s Metal Podcast is at Substack. It's where you can go to sign up for the box newsletter, which comes out every week. Our release calendar of 80s, 90s, and aughts relevant music. And lastly, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback for the show. So for Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. I'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.